Here now, NewsNation Chief Washington anchor Leland Vittert and host of On Balance with Leland Vittert. Good morning, Leland, as always. All right, let's take people through this process. The Republicans have little room for error in this vote if they want to move this forward. Who are the holdouts and how many are there right now?
You can afford to lose three. There's people who, not surprisingly, come from congressional districts that President Biden won. So these are swing districts that are worried about this. And there's also some people who are worried just on the face of what kind of precedent this sets, that if Republicans go through this impeachment inquiry and then don't deliver the goods, and that being a quid pro quo of proving that there was an official act done by then Vice President Biden, or now as President Biden, because of Hunter, and that there was money exchanged for those acts, that it'll look like Republicans went on a fishing expedition and then came home with no fish. So that is definitely a risk that Republicans are talking about here. I think the bigger issue for this is going to be Republicans convincing the American people that it's worth going on an impeachment inquiry when it's pretty obvious that even if there was an impeachment inquiry, then there was an impeachment, that impeachment is dead on arrival in the United States Senate. So this is never going to be a case where President Biden gets removed. This is a political act, right? Which impeachment is, but this is a political act, and it's a political fishing expedition to provide more evidence that Republicans think they're going to find against President Biden that can then be used in the campaign.
I mean, I heard some of the numbers there that Alina alluded to, 63,000 documents. They've got 82,000 emails that they want access to. The GOP still being asked, to your point, Leland, where is the evidence? Have those pushing for it answered that specifically, other than to say, we just need more information, we haven't found it yet?
They would argue that there is an awful lot of circumstantial evidence that President Biden, then Vice President Biden, did things to benefit Hunter Biden's business partners, right? That would be the connection. That these emails show that President Biden lied when he said that I have no interaction with my son's foreign business partners, on and on and on and on. All of that can be true, but still missing that important link of the quid pro quo. Of the money for an official act. And I think you get the understanding of the political nature of this from Mike Johnson's USA Today op-ed that you pointed out, where the speaker said, Earth to Democrats, Joe Biden is a dumpster fire. Well, being a dumpster fire isn't illegal. And whether or not that equates to high crimes and misdemeanors is something that the House will decide, and the Senate then would convict on. Or acquit on. But I think we have to look through this much more through a political lens than a legal lens. I would only add to this some reporting out this morning from Axios about just how much this all upsets Joe Biden. He publicly takes a very sort of stoic view of it, but you see some flashes of anger, and there's discussion that it's quite distracting to him. It angers him. It creates a lot of sort of consternation for him and for his advisors internally in the White House. And if you're the Republicans, pushing on the buttons of your enemies' sort of deepest, darkest issues works.
Right. And in recent days, he has come out, and it does make him mad. He says it's a lie. It didn't happen. I'm curious, though, the court of public opinion, for their response, many Democrats say, the public just frankly isn't interested in this. Is there truth to that?
There's a lot baked into the view, right, that Hunter Biden would never have been given millions of dollars in consulting contracts if his name was not Biden, right? We can all agree that major companies around the world would not have put Hunter Biden on their board and hired him if it was not for his name and the access that his name granted. Do hardcore Democrats, do true Biden supporters care about this? Absolutely not. But that's not what elections are about. Elections are not about sort of the extreme sides. They're about the middle. You're talking about 100,000 votes between Georgia, Arizona, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada that are going to decide this election. And do those people care? Do those people kind of have a feeling that they want their president to be above board? And remember, In 2020, President Biden ran as the antidote to the craziness and what he would call the corruption of Donald Trump. If it is proven that Joe Biden and his family act in exactly the same way he says Donald Trump does, it certainly blunts any attacks on Donald Trump over these issues. Donald Trump was impeached over Ukraine. We all forget that, for impeachment number one. So it will make it much harder for Democrats to land these attacks if Donald Trump is the nominee, if Joe Biden is wounded in a similar way.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find NewsNation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.